video review.
I reviewed this game, The Witcher 3, earlier in the year. Well, last year in August. And it's a game that I just had to go back to and make a video review on. It really has to be on this channel. This is a game that's been critically acclaimed, a game that is dubbed up to be a serious contender to be the greatest RPG of all time. Does it live up to the hype and praise, or does it fail to live up to expectations? First of all, the open world. The open world is so authentic and immersive that it'd give Rockstar a run for their money. Made by a small studio in Poland with nowhere near the budget that the big name franchises have, and yet the game world has so much detail, diversity and attention given to every corner that you would usually only find that standard of quality in Rockstar games. The open world in this game is on par with anything Rockstar has made, if not better. The game is huge, but not just huge, packed with life and things to do. The countryside known as Velen is huge and has variety. Later you then reach the main city, which is bigger than you think, known as Novigrad, and it's very detailed and packs deep with life and content. The game feels big enough, and then all of a sudden you travel to Skellige, which is a whole new island of mountainous countryside. It looks amazing and has some beautiful sights. Skellige sort of looks a bit like Far Cry 4's game world. Then on top of all of that, the icing on the cake is Kaer Morhen, the home place of the Witchers, which is a small little map, but big, slightly bigger than you think, and it looks stunning too. The world is fantastic and packed with so much variety. It really is a beautifully crafted world that goes on for miles. One of the best open worlds I have ever seen in a video game. When it comes to RPGs, I can be particularly fussy in how the game will interest me. For me, RPGs have to have three things that will make them a great game. A great, diverse open world, a deep and intuitive skill and level progression system, and an interesting theme or story. This game has all three of them. Something that I've never seen a game do so well in is how it creates a story that lives and breathes in every aspect of the game world, and how the decisions you make in both of the side missions and main story can change and influence each other. For example, without spoiling the game, the Baron's story starts as a main quest, and once you receive your info about your missing daughter Ciri, you then can move on, but have the option to continue helping the Baron find his wife in a side mission. However, the choices you made before in both side missions and main story could very much change the outcome of how the Baron's story ends up, and it's very likely that if you have a chat with your friend that's played the same mission, you may have not had the same outcome. Villagers can change their attitude towards you and say relevant things based off your decisions. This amount of depth carries through the story to the point where it's extremely unlikely that you'll have the same experience and even the same ending as you did before or as someone else. People will die in one person's game and live in another person's game, and then the same people that died in your game could become to be big characters with more quests for them to play that play a start in their story in their save game. This is all influenced by the decisions you'll make as you go through the story. That element is genius about the game. The story doesn't just stop there. It can influence the way villagers and the game world responds to your actions, either in the main story or the side missions. This makes the decisions you make feel so much more meaningful, as you know different decisions could influence and change the game world around you. Villagers will often call you a freak and will discriminate against you because you are not a normal human and are a witcher with unhuman-like abilities. Do certain things such as contracts or secondary missions, however, to help the village, and that could change. Get into a bar brawl and massacre everyone, and watch how everyone panics and looks at you in fear and disgust. It adds such believability to the game. From solving murder cases in a Sherlock Holmes-like manner using your Witcher senses, which by the way is a fun intuitive little game mechanic I haven't seen in a game done in this simple, effective way, to playing the local hero from slaying monsters in exchange for money, to helping cases of vendetta, to going on the hunt to find Ciri. The game has so many types of quests and some of them are crafted so well which keeps it exciting. And better yet, like I said before about the story, you have the choice on how the quest will pan out based off the decisions you make throughout the quest. The sheer amount of variety of types of quests is great. Secondary missions or side missions in this game are equally as interesting and important as the main story. They should not be treated as just a little thing on the side to do. The amount of attention given to every single quest is very applaudable. The game has a fairly serious tone to it, but at times can have a sense of humour to it, particularly in Kaer Morhen later in the game, which had some pretty amusing moments. It's nice to know that the game's script has some charm to it and isn't always serious like you commonly see with RPGs.
How does this work? Well, twist here, turn there, and you gotta say something in Elvish.
Easy peasy, let's do it.
What is this? Who's that?
So sorry. We were never here.
Guards! More paper, Excellency! Oh, you oaf! The lodge has come for me!
On the contrary, the story does have parts that seem dull, and I can sometimes lose track of what is going on because of how disinterested I am. Some of the missions can often lead to fetch quests where you must do someone a favour for information or do someone a favour by fetching items or killing a few things from the kindness of your heart. Not really, I just want the XP. Developers obviously want to maximise gameplay time, so some quests can either be long-winded or not needed and are literally only done because you want the XP, not because you wanted to. Your motive can sometimes solely be just to earn XP, and you don't necessarily have any idea of what's going on or what cause you're fighting for sometimes, despite how Geralt acts. This makes me, the player, feel slightly disjointed from the story at times. However, most of the story missions and side quests are honestly brilliant. It's very rare that I have felt like this, and most RPGs I will feel like this, so it's not a big criticism. Honestly, that's not to say that the story is not believable, as the story fits the game world fantastically. It's just at times I don't always feel connected to the story. This could be because medieval fantasy settings are often not my type of thing. Don't get me wrong though, the game frequently impresses and has plenty of enjoyable quests. It's just at times there are quests that are uninteresting, and although you can argue that it gets more playtime for your money's worth, it can sometimes feel like a drag. When the story shines in this, however, it shines bright and captivated me. And for someone who doesn't always enjoy the medieval fantasy story style, with some exceptions of some games, for me to be very impressed by the story as a whole is a huge feat to frown upon. I also must bear in mind that I have not played the first two, so there is slight patches in the story I don't understand, but the game does a good job of explaining things to newcomers, and the story doesn't have too much to do with the previous games, so you're not handicapped by not playing them. Overall, the story is epic. A very long-winded story, but a story that ends up being an epic tale of Geralt and Ciri, with other characters coming into the frame. This isn't a perfect game. As with any game, it does not go without faults. On the console, it technically struggles at times with choppy frame rates, and the average frame rate isn't the butter-smooth 60 frames per second that you would want to see on this generation of consoles. From my understanding, it's also a very demanding game on the PC, and you would need a very high-end PC to run it at smooth frame rates on adequate graphic settings. The game is a resource demanding game, but from the scale of detail and the size of the game, it's understandable. There's a fair amount of various bugs and glitches, but again, it's understandable in such a big open world game, as many open world games suffer from that. I won't be discussing too many negative points that can be patched. Already the developers have shown great support by listening to the community and rolling out many patches. One criticism is the authenticity of the cutscenes and characters at times. Voice acting is superb on the most part, however there is some inconsistency. The world seems to be based off a medieval Britain, or some sort of medieval European place. The majority of voice actors are British with all different varied British accents. I love that the British voices are not stereotyped and all feel authentic, with a variety of Scottish and Yorkshire and Bristol and Irish and Skellige and London accents being spoken throughout the game. With that being said, there's some characters' voices that just do not fit in the world. For example, Triss. She's an interesting character. The dialogue isn't actually at fault, but her voice acting is, which makes the dialogue and characters seem stupid at times. It's a shame as the character is likeable, but the voice acting is poor for a character. I think it's a very noticeable American accent that just doesn't feel like it fits when in comparison to all the other characters' accents.
Toot and tread like a child. If not for you, we need to find Brandon.
Geralt, the main character you play as, has this cliche, husky, badass voice that never seems to raise in any situation and always has a monotone. It seems very off at first, but admittedly his voice does grow on you.
Mage has left. Hunters needed a new quarry. You'd agree to be the bait?
I fear you'd be hard-pressed to convince Emir to dangle himself as such.
Fat fucking chance. Geralt, I wouldn't trust this cunt to hard-boil my eggs.
Rightly so, I'm terrible with eggs. But think on this.
The game hasn't got as much production value as other open world games, which at times can be noticeable. Comparing this to the benchmark that Rockstar set for open world games numerous times, and yet again with GTA 5, it's rare that you'll ever hear the same random dialogue from overhearing a random person's conversation, which can be amusing. You'll never see the same character model, whilst on The Witcher, on the other hand, has recycled character models at times. Most of the time it will just be a random NPC though, and not a main character. Repeated random dialogue will be noticed throughout too from the NPCs.
You're the oldest, so tell us. Just what's a horde do exactly?
Well, my dad told me they do things Mum won't.
My mum hates to do the laundry. So that's what all those gentlemen do at the Passiflora. Get their laundry done?
Guess so. Looked in the window once. They was all prancing round in their knickers.
So why's my dad say the Passiflora is the best because it's got the dirtiest horse? Golly, adults are strange.
Some of the characters are not as memorable or as fascinating as other games out there, but it still does a good job in delivering a deep, rich, character-driven story, and some of the characters are very likeable. And that being said as well, I think that compared to other RPGs out there, the characters in this are a lot more memorable and interesting than, say, the likes of Bethesda games, in my personal opinion.
Never took you for a poet.
Oh, but I am one. Want to hear a limerick?
Sure,
Lambert, what a prick.
not bad.
The Witcher 3 has arguably the best historical world I have ever played. Although it's fictional, it feels like a very authentic medieval Britain. Apart from a few modern quirks within the game, everything on the most part is realistic. However, I like that there's slight modern touches to the world and people, such as certain language people use and the way people dress. It feels like a fictional world based off real-life historical settings, but with CD Projekt Red's own creative touch to it, which is fantastic. Little things to add, the game also has dynamic weather and time of day, which I like in games, as it gives locations variety and a different look each time you visit. Something I wish more games had, as it can change the aesthetic of the location. The rain though is quite underwhelming and doesn't really look that great or even really change the skylighting in certain areas that much at all, which is especially noticeable at night, and the rain particles just look weak. Not really a big issue, it's just a slight thing I picked up on, but I'd be pulling at straws to say this is a genuine criticism of the game. It's just a tiny thing that bugs me a little. That's not to say that the game isn't a good looking game, because it is. It's a very good looking game. The art behind some of the scenery is beautiful, and then the sharp graphics give it that extra polish. The game can look stunning at times. The art behind it is amazing, let alone the graphics. Skellige especially looks spectacular. Although it's slightly disappointing that the PC version looks a lot better, especially the water, and on top of that, the frame rate is better provided you have the right specs, whilst on the PS4 version looks worse and runs worse, something we should not be seeing in this generation of consoles when they're so new. It's not a big complaint. It doesn't take anything away from the experience really. It's just a slight niggle I have. AI at times can be extremely stupid, which overall makes it an easy and free kill for you. Enemies at times will just stand there, glaring at you, waiting to be killed. Slightly breaks the immersion, but it really isn't anything too much to moan about, and it really doesn't happen that much. XP is solely gained through quests and not through killing enemies, which is an interesting design choice. It essentially makes the players have to play all the story content the developers have to offer in order to progress your character, and prevents you from grinding out killing the same enemies or doing the same task over and over again to quickly level up. It makes great sense. However, it does somewhat restrict the freedom of an RPG, because you have to keep playing quests and you don't really have the freedom to roam around attacking things knowing you'll gain that XP you desire. Yet you can still gain loot or needed crafted items from wandering around killing creatures, so it does balance it out. You can also be rewarded quite well from wandering around and exploring, but often it will lead to a quest, which does add a little bit more grind to the want of loot and XP. This design choice does benefit the game though, because each quest has a recommended level, and if you do the side quests coherently with the main story, it leads to a better experience of the game. All you would have to do is play the quest based off the order of each recommended level. For example, the quest to look for Ciri in Skellige comes up as soon as you arrive at Novigrad, but the recommended level is too high for what your level will be once you get there. So the game will naturally push you to do everything else in Novigrad before you go out there, and the story makes much more sense to do that too. The design of how the story is laid out, where a certain order for you to do is based off your recommended level, is actually a very smart design choice, and it makes it a better experience for the player. Although inevitably you will start out leveling quests, so some secondary quests will probably be missed out. If you look at this structure in comparison to the Elder Scrolls games, which I think does not do a very good job at all in structuring the quests, and that it becomes messy very quickly, the developers of The Witcher 3 do a fantastic job of keeping it neat. Speaking of neat, which is more down to personal preference, but the inventory can get very messy with the crafting and alchemy ingredients. You soon learn though that the objective is to simply pick up everything, and then when you're at a crafting screen, you'll just scroll through whatever items you can and can't make right now based off your ingredients. Thankfully, CD Projekt Red, the developers, removed the weight of any ingredients so that it does not take up any inventory space anymore. This was a much needed patch, so now there is no drawback at all from picking up all the ingredient items. There is also a fair bit of romance in this game. Romance that you have the choice to take part in or not. As Geralt constantly runs into romantic affairs, you have the choice to play a role in how his relationship with people will pan out. This is something I have never seen in a game before, something that is done very well. It's not in your face about it, it's just subtle moments of romance that comes into play in this dark world you're in, and I like it because it's very cleverly done and it's surprisingly quite enticing. It's not cheesy and it's quite grown up about it, done in a neat way. The pacing of the character development between Geralt's relationships with people is spot on. The romantic encounters flow naturally along with the narrative, and this is from the excellent character pacing. The combat is tactical and very satisfying. The blows and death are as brutal and gory as ever, and combining a mixture of spells with quick dodges, fast attacks, and then that crucial power attack that does critical damage, it all feels intuitive and fresh. It's not a button masher, it's tactical, but not slow paced and so tactical where you really have to think. It's very natural. Oh, and smashing people's heads clean off whilst running a horse is sweet, when it works. A pretty significant flaw with the gameplay is how at times it can be very clunky and buggy, especially in combat. It's not game breaking, but it's slightly annoying. Thankfully though, the combat is enjoyable enough that the clunkiness can be put up with. Oh yeah, I haven't mentioned Ciri properly yet, have I? The main story revolves around finding her. She is Geralt's adopted daughter. He trained her as a child at the Witcher camp Kaer Morhen. She possesses a rare source of supernatural blood known as the Elder Blood, which a faction called the Wild Hunt are after her, from which you learn the reasons of events as you progress through the well-paced story. Every time you bump into someone who can tell you what happened to her when they saw her, it goes into a flashback where you play as her and fight your way through where you were travelling. It's a cool design choice. Rather than hearing about her as Geralt, you get to play as her. You get to actually feel and understand how powerful she is. Geralt is a great fighter, and you improve as you level up. The sense of progression is great. You are capable of taking on a room and a group full of enemies. Ciri, however, is capable of dealing with a whole army. 10 to 20 people could be taken out. Because of her speed, no one can deal with her. Her ability and power reminds me of Neo from The Matrix. Actually experiencing this makes her much more memorable and an exciting character rather than just hearing about it. There are moments that really made me think of Neo from The Matrix, which is awesome. Witcher contracts are interesting. You take on a contract to kill a monster, typically a challenging boss, and then you get paid in return. But not just get paid, the loot you can get sometimes is very satisfying. It's a nice touch to the already deep content filled game. The Witcher 3 has a ridiculous amount of content in this game, and in today's world where it seems like you get less content than what you pay for, The Witcher 3 has an unreal amount of content, and it makes you think how much effort the developers put into this game, and it makes you wonder how staggering the effort must have been behind the scenes. I would say this game has over 100 hours easily, maybe even 200 hours, with many hours put into this, with still more stuff to do. It really makes me feel like the purchase is fully justified. One thing I do find is that it's not a pick up and play game. It's a game you need to devote a lot of attention to, and does not always have that addictive nature to it, depending on what is going on in your game at times though. It can really hook you sometimes. The game Layton is epic. There were some awesome moments for Ciri in a Dragon Ball Z-esque manner to it. After that, just when you think the game is over, it still asks you to do more, a lot more. The element of surprise was good, and again amazed me on how many hours you can get out of this. Every time you think the story is over, it throws in another curveball. If you're a fan of role-playing games or RPGs, action games, historical games, or are open-minded to playing any genre of game, this is a must-have, and in fact, a must-have to anyone's collection of games. It really is a creative masterpiece. From the unique locations and environments that the fantastic open world has to offer, to the excellent and unique story, to the fine attention to detail put into every quest, where every quest you do has an original, well thought out story that pans out. This is without a doubt the best RPG I have ever played.